Hi guys, this is another session which we are just starting. Uh, Basically, is for communication skill, and this is a very important topic. And many such time people are struggling for a communication skill. So this particular session we are just primarily addressing to particularly corporates, people who are working into you could say different corporates here, maybe in different organizations, maybe in different societies, or maybe in different you can say communities. So, what is the communication, right? That is, we need to understand, right? So, basically, when there has to be a particularly, we require a medium for a communication. So when let's say if you want, you will see when the child got born, right? In that scenario, child will express the expression. If something child want to communicate to their parents, right, through some expressions, maybe through some activities like that, then parents or maybe mother are trying to understand what is basically the child requires like that, right? So it's a nothing but the communication. Many such time, if you will see, there are people who are not able to speak. They give some kind of what I can say, the communication signs, so that they can send that expressions or the message to a person, right? So you will see into particularly in news, right, which is for people who are not able to speak. They give that particular message through some expression so people can understand, and based on that particularly lips movement or some other fingers movement, they're trying to understand actually what the person want to say it. So that is a basically, so there is a different ways. Even though if you will say animals has a different ways of communications. And maybe you heard about so many different people who also speak with the birds, and they are the bird lovers, or maybe they communicate in the different ways and different you can say ways. But when we are trying to understand that into a professional life, in professional career, so let's say you are already able to speak it, so there is no such activities or expressions as of now required, because you can communicate something from your mouth, right? And good part is that there is the English language. It's a worldwide is getting used actually to communicate with each other. So in general, if you are not in particularly in, you can say, know the English, or maybe you are from different community where people are using some other languages, so that languages are also people are using to communicate the message, right? So that is a basically is very important point. What is the medium we are using it, correct? So if you are using a medium, people were using a sending a message earlier. There was a telegram, there was something we called as a postcard, and there are different other ways we through post office we used to send a message and send the details, correct? Now then there was some evaluation, we send a message on the telephone, then on the mobile, or maybe WhatsApp and social media. So there is a different ways to we use the devices to communicate and to give that message to a particularly a person, right? And there is a, in case of professional career, we generally, or maybe into companies or communities, we generally use that email, or we use that WhatsApp, we use that, you can say, over a call on something we call, can call as on the telephone, or we use just give a communication directly when we are sitting in front of each other, or maybe in communicating on the Zoom nowadays, on Zoom or Microsoft Meeting or Google Meet, like that, right? It's a online meeting platforms. So these are basically different, particularly what we can call as ways to communicate it, uh, the message, right? So these are different ways to communicate the message. Now when you want to understand, you wanted to communicate something, you need to use some particularly channels, correct? Now exactly, when you wanted to use what type of channel, it depends on the requirements, it depends on the environment, it depends on particularly a scenarios, right? Let's say if the client is not taking up your call generally, they expect that some emails, right? So there is an email communication when particularly so they don't come and pick up your call or any personal messages or voice call or any Zoom meeting. So they generally basically take it up on that message or details on the over the email. Sometimes you heard about there are cold clients, they also expect that message and you can say details on the particularly over the email, correct? So they say don't call me up or don't send me any WhatsApp message, send an email. So I wanted to look at everything into an email. So there is an email communication. But when we are talking about you are working in a team, you are reporting to a boss, right? So generally, your supervisor want that communication in one to one, maybe in front of him, or maybe you can join into a particularly Zoom meeting when the your boss or manager want to interact with face to face and wanted to understand some challenges, progress, and everything. So email will be the secondary sometimes, right? So they want on face to face, maybe one to one or like this, or maybe in meeting, you are basically interacting with this. So you are not sending an email to everybody. Okay, I have sent an email. I cannot go with, you can say, into a meeting and in front of the city, giving details or maybe giving a message to everyone, something like that. Or you are not sending any WhatsApp message because you are already present in physically, or if it is not physically, because everybody is expecting you over the meeting or maybe Zoom meeting or somewhere. So you can come and then you can give the message. So you need to choose that particularly media on that channel wisely, right? So it also makes some impact when you wanted to give any particularly message and what type of channel you are using it. Correct. Now, what is a message? Basically, the details actually you want to communicate, right? So the message could be anything. Maybe it is an informative message. Maybe it's related to much more detailed message, or maybe there is a different type of messages are there. Correct. So you need to understand that message, right? If you wanted to give some details and updates, if you wanted to give the complete document, or maybe you can say everything into a message here, or maybe if you wanted to give some presentations, that is also a part, you are giving a briefing to like this. So it depends on what is the message you wanted to communicate it. If you are giving some overview or feedback, then that is a message. If you wanted to give any particularly a motivational talk, that is also a message. If you wanted to give a complaint, that is also a message. If you wanted to give some overview or presentations for a detailed plan, a detailed something like that, detailed techniques, that is also a message. So there is a different type of message. If you are working into community, so if you are just giving some details related to community, maybe some activities you wanted to do or something like that, then that is also a message, right? So it's a different type of ways people are just giving a message here. Multiple channels we have already covered here. So multiple channels, when we are talking about the multiple channels, we have already given that what is the basically meaning of, right? Maybe you can use WhatsApp, you can use a particularly paper note, maybe you can use a email, you can use a voice call, you can use the WhatsApp, Telegram, you can use a Zoom meeting, or maybe you can just go personally meet and give that. So when you are meeting with personally, giving any details and message here, that is always is very personal. It's very direct, right? So in that case, if it is really required to one, then it is, or maybe personal meeting message or giving that. So that is always good enough because it makes much more sense and people can get that your sense and feeling also when you are giving a message personally after a meeting like this, right? So rather than email, many people can send it, but the person is doesn't able to understand, right? Your emotions, your feelings, and what you wanted to present it. But you meet with, then it is little better. When you speak it, speak the particular person, so it is little better over rather than sending a mail. If you are meeting personally, that is always much better rather than speaking over the call and or maybe sending an email. So that is also very important. Apart from that, so sometimes whatever you are communicating, is this person is also trying to understand or get the message in the same way whatever you are trying to. Let's say if you are saying X, but person is trying to understand as Y, right? So it is a is this a fault of the person who is taking a message? No, you need to take a ownership of the message is basically nothing but the responsibility to give a message, right? So if you are giving some message to somebody, but as a in the form of, let's say, you are trying to explain as a X, but the person is understanding as a Y, right? So he is interpreting that message into a different ways. Correct. Maybe you are giving any sales presentations, you are giving some details, but person is thinking something else and he is considering as a Y, but you are giving as a X. So that is basically you need to take a ownership or maybe as a responsibility to give a message, because this message, whatever you are communicating, right, the person is not trying to understand. So you need to re-verify and you need to take a full responsibility. The person is trying whatever he is or she is getting, that is exactly what you want to trying to give that message. So that is very important, because most of the times some that is the one scenario. Another scenario is, let's say, if you are, as an example, you are trying to explain some particular problems when you are not able to deliver any work. Correct. So in that scenario, how you wanted to basically explain it, right? So you, because maybe your superior or your team is taking and interpreting in different ways. But what is the details you want to communicate? Is this because of your own problem? Is this because of some other challenges? So you need to communicate the message in proper ways, right? Let's say if you are just trying to get that leave to your manager. So how you are communicating that message to a particularly manager so that he or she can be ready to give in leave, right? So that is a basically how you are communicating the message here, right? So you need to take a responsibility to give a message. Correct. Apart from that, let's say if you are just setting into your goal setting or maybe performance review. In performance review, then what is the message you wanted to give it to a particularly person? Let's say some places you have done a good job, some places in you have not performed very well. So in that case, how your supervisor or your manager will interpret your work or things like that. So how you are giving a message, how you are communicating your details, that is very important. If you are writing any email to a particularly a client, in the client, so in client mail, what is the basically CL steps we have written, what type of languages you are using. So actually written communication is little different, right? That is also a part, but it is little a completely different topic, but I'm just covering here. So how you are writing a message here, right? And how you are writing an email so that person can read that crisp email in proper ways, trying to and it will understand what you are trying to communicate it, right? And so that is very important. Email communication is very important in the professional career. So how you are writing an email, maybe in your counterparts, your different teams, your HR, maybe in your supervisor, your management. So if it is, are you giving any suggestions, are you giving any complaints, if you are giving any, you can say any other overview, whatever things, right? So how you are communicating that message, so that you need to take a responsibility to give a message, saying that you need to explain properly in such a way. If you are explaining as a X, then person should take it as a X only, right? So this is very important in different ways, right? Another point is that people don't use the communication channel at all, right? So sometimes that is a communication gap. So if they trying to do some assumption rather than to do a communication. So in particularly working in a team, if there are any challenges, something like that, they stop rather than to give a proper direct communications, they take some assumptions. They do some assumptions like that. So they don't, sometimes they don't feel that it is important to communicate it, right? So either it is also is a ignorance, or maybe you can say procrastination is also. So you will feel that this communication is not important. Let's say if you are not coming into on time on 10 o'clock, but you are not feeling it is important to communicate and give a message to your manager team, you are coming little late. So you feel that it is not important, but they feel it is important, right? So the communication here is a communication gap, and also is basically nothing but you are just using ignorance. Then if you are, let's say, going home, but this work is not yet completed, but you are not communicating, and you thought that you will come tomorrow morning and you will complete it, but your manager is expecting at the evening that you will communicate and update the status. That is basically another gap here. So that is another way, another challenge into communication, correct? Let's say there is a particularly a task which you are working, but you are not able to communicate it. But rather than two, you are giving these updates on the same time or same day, you are giving after 3 days or 4 days, right? Because you are thinking you don't want, you should not give that updates, but your manager is expecting some update, right? So that anyone can help it to you and the work can be delivered on time, because entire team will struggle after that. So that is another problem when you are facing that feeling that this communication is not important and you are not communicating in proper ways, correct? So this is also ultimately making and creating some challenges. People sometimes don't explain their problems or challenges, right? And they are, so manager is basically considering and interpreting in some different ways the person, how the person is working, but you have done into some different ways, correct? So there are some different ways, challenges here, right? Sometimes in there are other in personal life also there is a communication. So let's say two people are working into a same place, but somehow because of some issues they are not able to communicate one thing and they took some assumptions, right? Maybe in husband wife also, if they are basically, if you are coming into a home late and you are thinking that it is not, you can say, important to communicate, to come, you can say call home and then just give an information like that. So but that wife is expecting something to communicate and tell me. So there is some expectation but people don't tell, but and they expect it. So that is another of challenge of this communication, right? So people sometimes, people, your manager sometimes don't expect tell you, but sometimes they expect it. So that is also you need to understand, right? The expectation of, when you are trying to basically, based on that, this communication and things, the relationship will be improved, right? So that expectation is also one of the part, right? When there is a no such fair communication, right? Maybe it could be in your personal relationship, maybe it could be your with your manager as well, right? So you need to understand that also, the expectations, and that is very important. So expectation, if you will understand the expectation and then accordingly you will be and you will have a much clear communication, it is always good, right? Maybe sometimes, let's say, your manager expect that you are working as into a professional manner, but so every time you will update the status, you are going home and you do something work, you are not leaving any work in half the way. Every time you need to complete it, something like that. But you took a leave or maybe any important work and you, let's say your child is sick or maybe somebody is sick and you went to hospital without informing to anyone or maybe in your manager. But so manager is expecting some calls, some updates, things like that. So it is a completely communication gap. So your manager will think you are irresponsible, you are not performing task on time, and you are not serious about the work and about the company and your responsibility. But you are performing is a good responsibility and good job as far as this family is concerned. So you need to communicate these things in a very proper manner to your manager or to your supervisor or to your team, so that the everybody is on the same page and the understanding is very clear. So this is one of the first session. Maybe we will create some more session related to communication later. I hope you will enjoy it. So if you really like it, you can subscribe the channel and so that you can get much more free content over